On December 18, 2020, Moderna Therapeutics became the second manufacturer to gain approval for its COVID-19 vaccine from the Food and Drug Administration after a year since Chinese authorities revealed the genetic sequence of the novel coronavirus back in December 2019. The news followed a sequence of victories for the company. Moderna shares were up 434% by the end of 2020. All the while, the pandemic threw the mainstream economy in the US and around the world in a downward spiral. Moderna quickly took center stage and gained notoriety for its advancements in fighting the pandemic, boasting a vaccine that had an effectiveness rate of 94.5%. But despite of how highly we might think of the company right now, in reality, Moderna was nothing more than a startup until the pandemic. According to a Wall Street Journal article published before the pandemic, Moderna Therapeutics had started with a mere $2 million investment. But with the help of the federal government, Moderna has been able to become the most valued biotech company in the industry. While the social, health, and economic consequences of the pandemic have been devastating, others have massively profited from the novel coronavirus. Moderna has been endowed with this unprecedented crisis. All the while, we have forgotten about all of the controversies and issues surrounding the company. Moderna was founded in 2010 by a partnership of business leaders and scientists to commercialize the research on STEM biology of Dr. Derek Rossi, one of Moderna's co-founders. Rossi had developed a passion for biology when he went to high school in Ontario, Canada. Eventually, he would earn a master's degree in molecular genetics at the University of Toronto and a PhD from the University of Helsinki in 2003. He then worked at a clinical lab at Stanford University until he was appointed associate professor at the Stem Cell and Regenerative Biology Department at Harvard Medical School. Rossi had found in his research that many of the drugs which we inject in our body to fight off diseases could be made from our body itself. He put this idea to the test when he founded Moderna. The Moderna team wanted to develop a commercial use for mRNA, the molecule which eventually gave rise to most of the COVID-19 vaccines on the market today. But what is mRNA anyway? Traditional pharmaceutical practices boost your immune system by having your body react to a drug it just ingested. Think of pills which contain antihistamines, vitamins, or supplements. Doctors often recommend patients of osteoporosis, a bone disease that occurs when your body loses too much bone or makes too little of it, to take regular medicaments of vitamin D. Vitamin D increases absorption of calcium, magnesium, and phosphate, just to name a few. Consequently, osteoporosis patients will absorb these minerals better, which will then help strengthen their bones, preventing bones from becoming weak and breaking apart. Ouch! After taking a pill, the capsule will reach your stomach acids to get dissolved. Once in your stomach, gastric acids will take over and dissolve the medication. After the pill is fully dissolved, its substances pass through your liver where they are broken down and then enter your bloodstream. Then, the remaining substances travel around the body and do their job. This process generally takes around 30 minutes, making for a quick, easy way of feeling better. But the use of pills as treatment is far from perfect. Your body can only process so much medicine, and the breakdown process means you have to take bigger doses to feel better. Pills can also lead to dependency if your body adapts to the drug. Pills might be fast, but they are not very effective. You know this well if you've taken allergy pills lately. Vaccines work in a similar way. The conventional method is for a manufacturer to develop a weakened version of the virus, so it doesn't make you sick, and have your immune system learn how to combat it before facing the real disease. While conventional vaccines have helped us eradicate diseases which have killed millions of people around the world, they take a long time to develop and approve. For most diseases, it takes more than 10 years for a vaccine to be developed, and up to 5 more years for it to be proven safe. This is because the process of finding a cure requires understanding the entire disease itself, which means you have to do a lot of testing and a lot of time-taking trial and error experiments, often with animals. On the other hand, mRNA medicines don't seek to understand the entirety of the disease, just some part of it. an mRNA vaccine doesn't give your body a weakened version of the disease or substances to strengthen your immune system. According to Moderna, mRNA medicines are sets of instructions, and these instructions direct cells in the body to make proteins to prevent or fight disease. In other words, rather than injecting you with the defense needed to fight off disease, mRNA treatments allow your body to create its own defenses to combat disease. mRNA is a single-stranded molecule that carries genetic code from DNA in a cell's nucleus to ribosomes, the cell's protein-making machinery, in order to make the proteins, which are the medicines needed to combat disease. Your body does this naturally. As a matter of fact, this is the same process which occurs after our body is injected with a conventional vaccine. The weakened version of the virus will trigger your immune system to take action and send white blood cells to fight the virus off. The problem is that your body has too little time to manufacture the defenses it needs. Developing these types of vaccines is also a time-consuming activity. Scientists have to figure out how to make a version of the virus which is weak enough so that it won't harm you, but strong enough that your body can learn how to fight it before facing the real deal. Instead, mRNA vaccines give your body the information it needs to produce the specific proteins needed to fight a specific disease. It essentially allows your body to focus on manufacturing defenses instead of wasting time and energy getting rid of the virus. Moderna scientists can start with their desired sequence for a protein. Then they design and synthesize the corresponding mRNA sequence to make that protein. Then they deliver that mRNA sequence to the cells responsible for making that protein through injections. Once the mRNA is in, the body can make its own medicine and fight off disease. While the ends of the two different types of vaccines are the same, the means are very different. And creating an mRNA vaccine is much easier and faster than a conventional vaccine. Some of the advantages of mRNA treatments. It's 2021. Everyone knows what Moderna is, but this massive biotech company was only a startup until very recently. From 2010, it took Moderna 5 years to reach over 100 employees. None of its potential drugs were on the market, and its many failures have been publicized and criticized over and over again. Before COVID, Moderna hadn't really discovered anything of use in the marketplace. That's despite enjoying substantial investments time and time again. By 2013, Moderna had already raised $415 million in financing and funding from private investors in the pharmaceutical industry. The following year, it secured another $110 million in funding, at a time when the biotech sector was the fastest growing sector in venture capital funding in the country. That same year, New England garnered more than $3 billion in venture capital funding. More than a third of those proceeds went to the biotech industry in the area. In 2014, a newspaper article in the Boston Globe read that Moderna Therapeutics has expanded into a new headquarters in Cambridge that nearly doubles its square footage. After 4 years of obscurity among the public, Moderna had achieved its first formal office, laboratory, and manufacturing space, a 50,000 square feet property. At the time, the company had 16 research programs underway. From 2014 to 2015, Moderna would become prominent in the biotech industry as a leading contender in innovation. It added 100 employees and secured $450 million in new financing, one of the largest private biotech investments ever. Moderna promised to use part of the funds to extend its research on using messenger RNA technology to specify the amino acid sequence of proteins in hopes of regrowing heart tissue after heart attacks. It partnered with AstraZeneca, a multinational pharmaceutical company headquartered in England, to collaborate on 29 drug programs. It was also working on 7 other programs with other companies and developing 9 drugs on its own. yet not a single vaccine or medicine from Moderna was on the market at this time. But Moderna looked good in the eyes of investors. It had acquired $1 billion in funding and still had $800 million in cash on hand. Moderna took Betsy Nabel, a cardiologist, president of Brigham and Women's Hospital, and the first ever chief health and medical advisor to the National Football League, as one of its board members, prolonging credibility in investors' eyes. Next year, Moderna took on another project. After receiving $200 million in funds from Merck & Co., a drug giant, Moderna began working on a cancer treatment with injections of mRNA. This was the first time Moderna's mRNA technology was taken seriously. Moderna chief executive Stéphane Bancel said in an interview that the new investment was a validation of Moderna's technology. Moderna began experimenting with personalized cancer vaccines that could work by themselves using your body's immune system with the mRNA information. Because of the side effects of chemotherapy and other cancer treatments on the patient, Moderna's vaccines could bolster the patient's decaying immune system during treatment, making the patient able to resist prolonged cancer treatment. The same year, Bancel pledged that Moderna would have its own manufacturing plant to produce cancer vaccines by mid-2018. But, like many of its earlier projects, this one also fell short. According to Moderna, the company would take tumor cells collected from a patient during a biopsy or surgery, then use computers to sequence the DNA from those cells. Using algorithms Moderna developed to compare the tumor DNA to DNA sequence from the patient's healthy blood cells, it selects 20 mutations in the cancerous DNA most likely to be recognized as foreign by the patient's own immune system. It then creates a vaccine specific to that patient that will show his or her immune system how to recognize the mutant proteins and attack them. According to a statement from the biotech company, "We built Moderna on the guiding premise that if using mRNA as a medicine works for one disease, it should work for many diseases. And if this is possible, given the right approach and infrastructure, it could meaningfully improve how medicines are discovered, developed, and manufactured." Moderna wanted to take its mRNA technology and go big with it. Investors fell for this dream and valued the company at $7 billion by 2018, making Moderna Boston's most valued startup. The same year, Moderna built a $100 million manufacturing center promising to make cancer vaccines. But not this or any other previous promise from Moderna had been fulfilled yet. Moderna lured its investors with failed promises, failing to deliver on its results. And backlash soon followed. Moderna has been consistently criticized for its lack of transparency and not publishing its data. A similar Theranos story has been drawn on the company. Theranos, the once claimed revolutionary unicorn led by Elizabeth Holmes, was touted as a breakthrough technology company, with claims of having devised blood tests that require only very small amounts of blood and could be performed very rapidly using small automated devices the company had developed. But, like Moderna, Theranos failed to report its findings and essentially its final product. Both companies amassed the support of high-profile executives and investors. For Theranos, the Walton family, the heirs of Walmart, had invested $150 million in Theranos. The Education Secretary under President Trump, Betsy DeVos, had invested $100 million. Other well-known investors followed suit, pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into Elizabeth Holmes' fraudulent company. Theranos defrauded its investors, tricked the public, and got away with years of false findings on its products. In February 2016, an editorial slammed Moderna for not publishing any peer-reviewed papers on its technology. The article compared Moderna's approach to that of Theranos, which also failed to publish any data on its supposedly revolutionary product. Moderna's CEO Stéphane Bancel also amassed critics on how he was running the company. An article published in 2016 claimed that Bancel had built a culture of recrimination at Moderna. Failed experiments have been met with reprimands and even on-the-spot firings. Employees recalled abusive emails, dressing down at company meetings, exceedingly long hours, and unexplained terminations. Furthermore, high-level executives at Moderna quit in droves, just like how they quit Theranos. In 2017, Moderna lost Dr. Stephen Kelsey, the head of Moderna's oncology division, to another biotech startup in California, after only 3 years of being at Moderna. After only 1 year, Moderna's chief science officer at the company's cancer-focused vision, Michael Marin, left Moderna. Since 2014, Moderna had lost more than a dozen top executives. A report by Damien Gard stated that a corporate culture that former employees describe as unpredictable and hostile has made it difficult for Moderna to retain talent. But Bansal painted Moderna as a disruptive force in the world of drug development. In a conference at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco, Bansal said that, "The thing that gives me the most hope is how committed our teams are. We have a chance to transform medicine, and we won't quit until we are done and we have impacted patients." But Moderna employees were walking away from it, even as the company promised to reinvent the entire healthcare industry. More and more parallels to Theranos were increasing as Moderna prepared to go public. Moderna abandoned failed projects over safety concerns and failed to deliver on any of its promises. Critics of Moderna claim that the biotech startup was running an investment firm, and then hopefully it would also develop a drug that was successful. This was the tragic ending of Theranos, which failed to make its revolutionary product work at the end. In terms of safety concerns, regulators forced Moderna to quit its research on mRNA vaccines at one point. The problem is that getting mRNA into cells required the use of a protective coating, and that coating can be toxic, which meant that with time, Moderna's experiments of repeatedly using injections were deemed unsafe. As revolutionary as messenger RNA cancer treatments might seem, Moderna couldn't find a way to commercialize mRNA. That was until COVID. Despite Moderna's far-reaching claims, the company had accumulated more than $1.5 billion in losses since 2010. Moderna lost $514 million in 2019 alone. The biotech startup had raised $3.2 billion since 2010, but had no use of its potential products, nor could it commercialize and make money on them. Its vaccines were useless. Many of its projects were abandoned, but there was hope. The coronavirus pandemic presented an unprecedented opportunity for the company. Despite the constant disappointments, Moderna had jump-started the push for mRNA research since 2010. It had a decade of experience with a team that had decades prior of studying mRNA technology. In early January 2020, Bansal was on vacation with his family in France when he read the news about a mysterious virus spreading in China. He took immediate action and set Moderna to work on a vaccine. The government provided Moderna with 2 grants of $483 and $472 million to develop the vaccine, as well as further funding if needed and a promise for contracts once the vaccine was developed. The federal government would later give Moderna $1.53 billion, bringing the total investment in the company to $2.48 billion. In March of 2020, Bansal told President Trump that Moderna could have a COVID-19 vaccine ready in a few months. The next day, the FDA approved Moderna's clinical trials and the vaccine was tested. Moderna's mRNA technology had failed many times over, but COVID was a much less complicated disease than cancer or the other conditions Moderna had been working on for years. Moderna could use its mRNA vaccine on COVID-19 because they were able to prove their vaccines were effective after 2 shots. So that toxicity concerns weren't met as they were with Moderna's cancer vaccines. In July 2020, Moderna had already 20 other experimental drugs and vaccines for cancer, infectious diseases, and other conditions in development, but none were close to being commercially available, even though Moderna had been working on them for years. Moderna had gotten many experiments wrong, but it only needed to get one right.
Moderna had virtually no revenue and no commercial products a year ago, and now here is emerging with potentially a leading vaccine candidate for COVID-19.
At the same time, Moderna's valuation had passed $30 billion. The support from the federal government had not only given much-needed credibility to the company, it had given it the funds and the unconditional backing it needed to develop a successful vaccine for the first time. Moderna was a mysterious startup which was linked to Theranos' demise, but within the span of a few months, it had become one of the most prominent companies not only in the US, but around the world. Moderna had gone public the first week of December in 2018. But by the end of that year, shares had fallen 34%. Its stock remained below $20 a piece until January 2020, just a few days after the first COVID case was reported in December 2019 in Wuhan, China. Just a year later, Moderna shares would increase by nearly 900%, reaching a $90 billion valuation. That's from a company that was started with only $2 million 10 years ago.